What is up, you guys? Welcome to Illumination Lab. My name is Justin, and today we're starting part 1 of modeling this dragon. In this video, I'll show you the references I use and ultimately the beginning portion of modeling our dragon head. I'm excited for this one. This is going to be a fun one today. So without further delay, let's get into it. Alright, so kicking off references today, primarily we use these two references here. What I liked about them is they were both very similar to each other, but they had just some subtle differences to them. Ultimately, with our dragon, what we're going to do is going to create some sort of Lego-esque dragon here, and so we'll just kind of create this piece by piece here, and we'll start with the head of the dragon and then kind of work our way through the body as the series goes. But primarily when we are constructing this dragon today, I am working off of these two sets here. So on the bottom right, we do see somewhat of a larger dragon here. What I liked about this one is you can kind of see the almost the entirety of the dragon from the head all the way down to the tail. And so when making something like this, I wanted to make sure that I had some sort of good reference to work off of when creating this. And then if we look at the back left here, we do have these two different dragons. I like this one just because it's a little bit different versus our other reference in the foreground here. What's cool about this reference specifically is you get two different dragons, so you essentially get two different perspectives of what the overall dragon is going to look like. And so I do use this to kind of help me with the backside of the dragon here, and then also different spots in the face area as well too. So but that's pretty much it for our references. Again, I just primarily work off of these, and then we kind of work within Cinema 4D. And of course, we do change it up a bit to kind of make it a little bit more personal or a little bit more our own. But I do use references to kind of give me just a basic idea of what we should be looking at when it comes to different portions of our dragon. So, but that's pretty much it for the references section. Let's hop into Cinema 4D and get started. All right, so hopping into Cinema 4D, I'm just going to bring in a S-curve here. And with this S-curve, I'm just going to kind of set up our boundaries of our scene here. And then I'll bring in a Redshift camera just to kind of create an initial perspective. Next, I'm going to bring in a cube here. What we're going to do first is kind of create the nose portion of our dragon here. And so I'm just going to bring in a cube to kind of start that process here. I'm just going to adjust the segments, and then I'm going to press C to make it editable. And then I'm going to our sculpting mode within Cinema 4D here. I'm going to select symmetry. And so I'm just going to take this top point and bring that down here. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this other side. Now, since we did press on symmetry, whatever I do to one side is going to affect the other side. And so that's looking pretty good. Next up, I'm going to highlight the bottom here and push this up. And so with this, we're just kind of creating a custom piece for our nose here. If you do look at the reference, you do have kind of a rounded edge in the beginning portion of the nose. And so that's what we're trying to recreate here. I will hop into Grayscale Gorilla. They do have a few different shapes. And so I'm just going to bring in this shape here. and we'll just kind of use that as a placeholder, and then later on in the project we'll replace that. But that will be good for now as our placeholder while we kind of set up the beginning stages of our dragon here. So next up, I'm going to rotate our shape here, and then I'm just going to adjust the scale of this one. Next, I'm going to rotate this and then just kind of line it up to the top piece here. That looks pretty good. We'll just adjust it. Okay, cool. Next up, I'll bring in a cylinder, and then I'll just rotate that here. Bring this up, and then we'll just adjust this to the left side here. Cool, and that looks pretty good. So what I'll do is I'll just copy and paste this here, and then just kind of shrink down our shape a bit. And then I'll just push this back. Cool. And then I will copy and paste this here, and then just have it again on this other side. And then I'll just adjust this top piece. All right, so next up, we need to round off our large piece here. And so I'm just going to go and bring in a taper, make it a child, fit it to the parent, and then I'll just adjust the strength. And then that will kind of give us that curviness to our shape, which is exactly what we're kind of looking for, especially if we look off of our reference. That's a very similar shape to what our reference has for the nose portion. And then I'll just kind of play with this a little bit and just see what I can get here. And then if I can just kind of bring this down here, we can kind of alter it a little bit more. And cool, yeah, that's looking pretty good. So I'll just kind of adjust that there, and then we'll just kind of hop back into our perspective here. Next up, I'll bring in a cube, shrink this down to 5 each. And then I'm just going to kind of line this up to our shape that we just made here. Next, I'm just going to copy and paste here and adjust our shape. Next, I'm going to bring in a taper here and make that a child of our cube. And then I'll just kind of change the segments here and just adjust the strength here, and that's going to give us a nice rounded edge here. So cool, awesome. So as you can see, it's coming along pretty good here. So we'll just kind of keep working away at this, and so I'll just do a quick save here. All right, so if we look at our reference, there are some pieces that kind of connect to the nose here. So what I'll do is I'll bring in a tube here and then just kind of shrink this down. And really what we're going to do is just kind of alter this to kind of create a like a C shape here. And so I'll just kind of adjust our radius, turn on slice, adjust our degrees here, and then turn on fillet to kind of give us a nice rounded edge to it. And then depending on what we want for our segments or the overall shape, we'll just adjust that there. I'm just going to rotate this. and then just kind of put it about where it's supposed to go here. I'm going to shrink this down and then just kind of move this over to its proper position here. And then let me just adjust the camera here, and then we'll adjust this. Cool, so that looks about right there. And then we can also adjust the height so it's a little bit thicker here. And then we'll just kind of move this so it's not clipping this piece. And then next up, I'm just going to go into symmetry and just make our tube a child of our symmetry here. And then just kind of turn off some of these tapers that we have here. Cool, so it's looking pretty good so far. Again, the reason why we're using symmetry is because we can make quick adjustments to the opposite side here. So we're going to use symmetry quite a bit with this just to make sure our dragon face is symmetrical. So okay, so next up, I'm going to bring in a cylinder here and just adjust the radius. Let's do it down to 1 here, and then I'll just rotate this here. And then we'll just change this to 0.5 and just line it up here. And then I'm just gonna kind of rotate the camera here and kind of see exactly what it looks like. And then I'll just move this down. And really with this, we're just kind of trying to create the whisker of the dragon here. And so what we'll probably do with this is we'll try to bring in a bend deformer to help kind of bend this similar to our reference. And then we'll just kind of take that from there. So what I'll do is just kind of adjust this here. Bring in our bend deformer, put it as a child. Select fit to parent, and then start to adjust the strength here. And so you could see as we rotate it, it comes off of our piece here. So I'm just going to adjust the bend and the shape of the cylinder here. And then just turn it, and that creates somewhat of a better shape than what we had. And so I'll just kind of adjust the length here. Cool, so I'll just kind of bring this forward. And again, just kind of continue to rotate this. We'll just kind of play around with this just to kind of create a different look here. And as I kind of bring it in, it kind of makes our curve a little bit tighter. And so we'll just adjust that here. And then I'm just going to bring in a symmetry and make our cylinder a child. And so instantly we have our whiskers there. I'm going to turn it off just because we are going to work on the nose a little bit more. So, and especially with the mouth area, I just don't want the cylinder to kind of obstruct what we're working on. So I'll just turn that off, and then we'll kind of work on that a little bit later down the road. Next up, I'm going to bring in another cube here, and then just kind of adjust it to the base here. and just kind of adjust it to our original cube here. Actually, what we're going to do is just delete this here, and we're going to kind of create our own shape. And then I'm just going to bring in a cylinder here. I'll just adjust the height and radius here, and we'll go over and select slice. And then I'll just kind of bring the height down, just to kind of give us a similar shape to what we had. Rotate this and then just kind of adjust it to what we previously had here. So I'll just kind of look at this. We'll actually kind of bring this back. So let me look at the reference real quick. And actually in the reference, our initial piece is somewhat flush to this base portion. So I'll just kind of adjust that there. And I brought the cylinders back as well, and we'll just give that a quick save. Cool. So next up, I'll highlight this portion, select extrude, and we'll just kind of bring that back to the back portion of that cube there. And yeah, that's looking pretty good so far. So and then if we kind of look at the reference, it's somewhat similar to what our reference shows here. So yeah, we're right on track. So next up, I'm going to bring in a tube, and then again, just shrink down the size of this. And then I'm just going to make that 10 for our radius. And I'll just turn this 90 degrees. And then with this is going to be essentially the nose portion of our dragon here. So I'm just going to kind of recreate a more of a like a cylinder or a donut shape here. And then I'll just kind of play around with the segments here. And so as we kind of play around with the segments here, we do have more of a rounded look overall. And so again, I'm just kind of adjusting it to make sure that it is somewhat similar to our reference, where it is completely round without having any sort of edges to it. And then I'll just adjust the scale quickly here, and then just kind of put this on the back portion of our nose. And then I'll just kind of increase that just a tad there. Okay, so next up, I'll just copy and paste our tube here. And then I'll just kind of decrease the segments there. And next up, what I'll do is I'll just copy and paste our original tube here, and then just adjust that to the back portion, and then turn off fillet and just adjust the height there. And so really with this, again, I'm just trying to make the nostril portion of our dragon. I'll bring in a null, rename it here, and then just take all of those tubes, put it in our null, throw in a symmetry, and that's gonna have it for both sides here. So right now we got the front part of our nose here and the beginning of our nostrils for our dragon. So we're looking pretty good so far. It's a slow process for sure, but it's gonna look pretty cool once we're done with this. So next up, I'm just going to adjust the nostrils just a bit, just because they're not that close together. So I'll just kind of move those there, and then just kind of adjust them. they are a little bit more slanted downwards, so we'll just adjust that. And yeah, that's looking pretty good. Okay, so next up, I'm just going to copy and paste our cube here and just adjust it to the back portion. Select taper, fit to parent, and then I'll just move that and just adjust the strength here. And that's going to give us a nice curvature to that shape. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And then what I'll do is just kind of rotate this here, just a complete 180. And then I'll just kind of peek over to our reference just to make sure that we're getting the proper shape here. And yeah, it's looking pretty good. So cool. So now that we have our shape, what I'll do is just turn off our taper here, and then I will copy and paste and just adjust the degree, and then just move it down a little bit here. And then actually with our nose, we can actually turn on fillet and have more of a rounded look to it. So I think that might look a little bit better than what we normally had with just the regular tube. And so I think a rounded edge kind of makes it a little bit more nice here, especially since we have a lot of hard edges when it comes to most of this geometry. Having a rounded edge will kind of, it would be nice to kind of break up most of this geometry here. Next up, I'll bring in a cube, and with this cube, I'm just trying to really start to develop the snout portion of the dragon here. And so I'll just kind of adjust this to the reference, and then I'll just kind of play around with our taper to just create the look that we're going for here. Now let me turn that off. I'm gonna bring in a symmetry and just do the same thing on this other side. So really with this portion, we're just trying to really look at the reference and kind of see how these references were designed, and then kind of recreate those portions by manipulating this geometry here. So next up, I'm going to select these cylinders here and just hit copy and paste. And then I'll just adjust our cylinders and kind of bring those over towards this area over here. And really with this, if you look at the reference off of the nose here, they do have a tooth here, and so we'll just kind of recreate that with our cylinders. So I'll just kind of shrink this down here, and then just select all of these and just adjust it. And really I'm just lining this up so it just fits nice here, and it's somewhat symmetrical as well. Next up, we're going to bring in a cone to create the tooth. I'll kind of adjust the radius a bit, rotate it, and just kind of shrink this down and bring this up. And then we'll just line it up to our cylinders here. And then if you look at our reference, our tooth is curved, and so I'll just bring in a bend deformer and then just kind of bend our tooth a bit here. And then we'll just rotate it so we can kind of see that bend. And then if we increase our segments, that makes that bend a little bit more smooth there. So cool. So that's looking pretty good so far as the tooth goes. I'm going to turn off the bend and just copy and paste this to make our second row here. Now the second row is somewhat smaller than our original row, and so we'll just kind of adjust it just to make sure that it is to scale here. And then we'll just kind of play around with the shape and the bends for our tooth here. And then just adjust our radius a bit. And then we're going to throw this into a null here. Select all of these and put these in our null. Bring in a symmetry and just throw our null into a symmetry there. Cool. And then next, I'm going to kind of turn that off just so we're not seeing the purple lines from the bend here. And so that's looking pretty good so far. These are popping up from the top here. So what I'll do is just take this cylinder and just kind of bring this down a little bit more so we're not seeing that on the top of our shape here. And so that should be good. Again, as we adjust one side, the other side's going to be adjusted as well with our symmetry turned on there. Okay, so next up, I'm going to just bring in another cube and just kind of adjust it here in the middle. And then just kind of line it up to our pieces here. Okay, so if we bring in a pyramid here and we just adjust it, what we'll do is just kind of bring this off to the side here. And then if you look at the reference, it does have a lot of different spiky triangle edges. And so we'll just kind of recreate that here by bringing in some pyramids and some bends. And then we'll just kind of alter the strength of our bend here again to kind of recreate that same shape. So I'll just rotate our pyramid here and just adjust it. Again, similar to our reference where it has a lot of those sharp edges and pyramid-esque shapes here. So cool. So I'm just going to turn off our bends and then just copy and paste another cube here. And really, I'm just kind of creating that foundation of our snout portion of our dragon here. And then now that we have the base for our snout, what we'll do is just copy and paste our shape that we had going on here. And so I'll just kind of bring this forward and then just lay this on top here. And then just kind of adjust this. And then I'll bring in another taper. And just kind of bring down that strength here. And then I'm going to turn on fillet, increase our segments here. And then just kind of move this shape more to the center of our cube. And then just adjust the x-axis here. And then adjust it again. And really, I'm just kind of lining this up to make sure that it is somewhat flush to our cube. And that looks pretty good so far. So we'll kind of leave that as B there, and then we can always adjust it later. All right, so looking back at our reference, we do see that there is somewhat of a, almost like a Lego piece on top of the dragon's nose here. And so we're just going to create that real quick. I'm going to bring in a cylinder here just to start off the piece. Then I'm going to drop the radius and the height and just adjust it here slightly. Turn on slice. Then I'll bring in a cube, drop down the size of the cube as well. and just shrink that down. And then really I'm just trying to get it to the same size as our cylinder here. Cool. And then I'll just kind of stretch it out to the very ends and just move that back here. And really I'm just trying to recreate that piece, so I'm trying to elongate it. And then I'm just going to copy and paste our cylinder just to kind of finish up that shape here. Next up, I'm gonna bring in a knoll and make these a child of the knoll here. I'll just rename that real quick. Then what I'll do is I'll just turn it and then we'll place it onto our shape here. But first, I'll just shrink down the size just a bit and place it right on top here. And then this middle piece is a little too wide, so I'm just going to kind of shrink this down here, and same with the two edges as well. And then just bring that up just slightly, and again just reduce down the size. And while I'm working on this, I am looking at the reference here. I'm really just trying to make sure I get the shape right, just to have the same look here essentially. So but other than that, that looks pretty good. Let me just adjust this here. Turn off slice. And then just kind of reduce this down to the top there. I'm going to turn on symmetry, and it's going to do the same thing on this other side. And then just bring those up just slightly. Cool. So that looks pretty darn close to what the reference has. So we'll just keep that as is. And then I'll give it a quick save here. Okay, so next up, I'm just going to adjust our pyramids here, and I'm just going to kind of adjust the way they are looking here. I'm just going to kind of rotate these a bit and bring them down. Next up, I'm going to bring in a cube, shrink this down to 5 each. And then bring this over to the side here. I'm going to bring in a shear, fit to parent, and just kind of play around with the strength. Again, we're working on the side of the nose here. And so really, I'm just trying to make sure that I can get a similar look to some of these shapes that were in the reference. And so I'm just trying to manipulate a few different pyramids and cubes just to help kind of recreate that same look here. And with this, I'm just going to rotate our pyramid. Turn it just slightly, and then just kind of bring that shape inside of our cube here. I'm just making sure that this is looking good from both angles here. And then I'm just going to kind of line up the shape to this cube. Cool, so that looks a little bit better. Let me just adjust that here quickly, rotate that a bit. Copy and paste. And I'm just going to bring down the square a little bit more, just to kind of continue with the shape of the snout here. Just copy and paste that shape quickly. And then I'll just kind of rotate this and slide this one down and kind of fit that in between. Cool, so that looks pretty similar to our reference here, having both some of these pyramids. I did turn this around to make it have more of a square shape, and then I did use the pyramid as more of a pointy surface as well to kind of help break up the two pyramids we originally put here, and then we just put that into a symmetry, and so that does that on both sides. Okay, so next up, I'm going to take that same pyramid, copy and paste, and I'll rotate this just slightly here. And then this one's just going to go right under our original pyramid that we made. Then I'm going to go over to the object, increase the segments, and then flip the orientation here, and then just kind of adjust it to the bottom of our pyramid here. What I'll do is actually start on this opposite side here, and so I'll just kind of adjust this pyramid. I'm going to bring in a shear, fit the parent, and with this I'm looking more for a kind of like a curved emphasis on this pyramid here. And so I'm just going to line this up to our shape here and then kind of work my way down instead of starting with our other shape originally. So next up, I'm going to copy and paste and rotate our pyramid here, and then again just kind of make sure that that's looking pretty good. And then I'm just going to copy and paste again, and then I'm just going to adjust it here and adjust this one to make sure that it's actually touching our shapes here. And that looks pretty good. I'm just kind of throwing in a few different options or just variety in general to really enhance this area, just so it's not so boring when you look at it. So looking pretty good so far, very similar to our reference here, and so we'll just kind of keep chugging along here. So all right, next up, I'm going to copy and paste here and just adjust this pyramid to our original shape. And then I just need to fix the top here real quick. Just going to kind of turn it here slightly and kind of reduce it down. And then just really make sure that that's kind of fitting nicely to our shape there. And as I rotate the camera, it does look pretty good here. Seems to be all lined up. Next up, I'm going to copy and paste our cube, kind of push this against the side here. And really, if we see any sort of spots that we missed, this cube will kind of help out with kind of filling up space within the snout area. And so I just want to make sure that that's somewhat flush against the shapes that we brought in here. And I'm just kind of rotating camera just to make sure that it's looking good here. Next, I'll bring in a cube Again, just kind of shrink down the size here. I'm going to bring in a null, and then I'm just going to take all of these and put it in our null. I'm going to turn off our modifiers here, throw in a symmetry, and so we have the same look. And then we turn off a lot of our shear and bend deformers, just to make sure that we didn't kind of clutter up the scene here with all the different purple lines that comes with a lot of those deformers here. So next up, I'll bring in a cube and just kind of adjust it to the side here. Next up, I'm going to copy and paste the hooks that we made earlier. So I'm just going to select those there and bring them to the back. Again, if we are looking at the reference, we do have that similar shape here at the bottom. So I'll just kind of bring that here, and then we'll kind of play around with this. So first thing I'm going to do is just come over here and adjust this to make sure that it's not clipping against our cube. We're going to put these into a null again and turn on symmetry here. Then I'm going to select on our null here and then just kind of pull it away from each other, and then just kind of line those up to our pyramids here. And yeah, that's looking pretty good there. So we'll just kind of continue on. Next up, I'll bring in yet another cube here, shrink it down to 5 each. Put it off to the side and bring in a shear here. And I'm gonna go ahead and fit to parent and just kind of play with the strength here. And again, if you look at the reference, we do have more of a curved shape here. And so I'm just trying to recreate that. I'm going to bring in a taper and then just kind of play around with the strength just to see what kind of shapes we can get with that. And while you're working on this or any other project, if you have some geometry that you're really trying to play around with, feel free to throw in a few different deformers or tapers or shears or anything like that, just to kind of see how the geometry reacts. And that's how you kind of learn a little bit more about what each individual thing does within Cinema 4D. And so even though it seems like it may slow you down as far as the process goes, but you actually are able to learn quite a bit of what some of this actually does. And so it's kind of good to kind of play around with this while you're working on the project, because while you're making whatever you're making, you're also kind of learning Cinema 4D a little bit more at the same time here. And as we kind of bump up our segments, you can see somewhat of a change. Our shape is kind of going more in a downward motion here. And so we'll just kind of adjust this here and line this up to the back. And that's a very similar shape to what we have in the reference, but we'll just kind of continue to tweak it a little bit more. Cool. And so I'm just rotating the camera here just to make sure that I have the right shape and it looks good in all different angles here. And then I'm just going to kind of play with the strength. And then I'll turn off our taper here And then with this, I'll bring in a bool, and really with our bool, I'm just essentially trying to cut our shape in half here. And so I'm just going to turn off the taper for our second one that we copied. And then just kind of push that down a little bit. And that's given us a pretty good look there. And then I'll just throw in a symmetry as well. And again, it does the same thing on the other side. So cool. So if you look at our reference, we do have another one of those kind of like a hook shapes, and then it is holding almost like a spear shape at the top of the nose. And so we're just going to recreate that here. So I'm just going to copy and paste our tube here and rotate it. And then just put this on the back side here. And then I'm going to bring in a cylinder and just shrink that down a bit and rotate it about 90 degrees here. Really bring down that shape. And now we're trying to make that spear looking part here. And so I'm just going to adjust our cylinder and then make sure that's kind of fitting within our tube. Adjust the length. Throw in a taper, fit the parent, and just turn up that strength there. So it kind of gives us that that spear end there at the end of our cylinder, which is pretty good. So, and then I'll just play with the height here just to make sure that I'm getting a good length with this shape. And again, throw these into a null into symmetry, and there we go. And I'm at this point, what you can do as well is with many of these shapes, you can kind of wait or throw them into the same symmetry. But with this, I personally like having separate symmetries because I can always adjust it need be if, you know, I need to. And so I feel like having separate symmetries kind of helps me find something a little bit quicker, but do whatever you personally like and take it from there. So all right, so off camera, if you look at our reference, we do have some of these eyebrows, and so I'm going to try to recreate that and kind of play around with that look, and then we'll kind of hop back into this here and I'll kind of tell you how I did that. So all right, so jumping back in, this one was pretty simple. I did bring in a few different cubes here and then did something similar with the shear as well, just to kind of create that same look. Of course, threw those into a null, turn on symmetry, and this is how we have our look here. So again, it was a lot of the same process initially, but I was just kind of playing with it off screen just because I necessarily didn't know how to achieve that look. And so I wanted to make sure that I could play around with it and really make sure that I could achieve that look for you guys. So again, for most of these, the eyebrow is going to be a pyramid that I elongated and bent with a deformer here. And then same thing with these pyramids on the top side. So I took a pyramid and made a bool out of it just to kind of cut off the top portion. So it's more of a almost of a trapezoid shape here, and I just stacked it on top of each other. So what's interesting about this is some of these shapes do look somewhat complex to make, especially if you don't really have a good foundation with modeling. And so even using a lot of our deformers that we have, you can kind of achieve a pretty good look. But really, I'm using a lot of bools and deformers here to kind of achieve the same looks versus actually making the shapes here ourselves. And so cool. So right now I'm just kind of working on this this piece here again with a bool, and two cubes essentially. And so I'm just trying to really play around with that shape just to make sure that I can kind of get that same look here that we do in the reference. And again, I'm just going to throw this into asymmetry here, and that will do the same thing on this other side. So cool. So it's come along. We have our snouts, the nose, some teeth here, and then we have kind of the forehead and eyebrows established. So we're slowly getting there, but it's been fun so far. Next up, I'm going to bring in a sphere, and we're going to start working on the eyes here. I'm just going to kind of reduce down the radius of those eyes and then just kind of place them about here just to get an idea of where the eye should be. Next up, I'm going to bring in this cylinder here. And if we look at the reference, there is a hole missing in the eye here. So we're just going to recreate that with a bool. I'm just going to shrink down our cylinder. Grab a bool, throw those two into a bool, and just kind of change that here and adjust our cylinder. And there we go. We get a similar look with a hole in the sphere here. Next up, I'm going to bring in a tube and kind of adjust the radius there. And then rotate this. Bring this back and kind of put that right around the eye. I'm going to turn off fillet, increase our rotation segments, and kind of bring this down. And really we're doing the initial ring around the eye here, and so that is very tight against the eyeball here, and so we're just trying to kind of recreate that here. And I'll just adjust it, bring that down, and then copy and paste our tube, increase the outer radius, and then just kind of bring that back here. If we do look at our reference, we do have an outer ring, and then we have a slightly bigger ring that is around the eye. So that's looking pretty good so far. Next up, I'm going to bring in a null, rename that eye. And then just adjust that so it's a little bit more kind of inward and looking a little bit more out. I'm just rotating the camera here just to make sure that I have a good look on all sides here. Adjust that slightly. I'm going to copy and paste our tube here. Turn on slice. And with this one, I'm trying to make the underneath portion of the eye. So I'm just going to kind of stretch that out here. And bring it underneath the eye. And if you can see, it seems to be a little bit at an angle. So I'm going to bring in a shear, fit the parent, and then just adjust that here slightly. And then select our tube and just adjust that to the eye here. Cool. So that kind of gives us a similar look. I'll just adjust the strength, and with fillet on, it looks a little bit better. And it is extremely important when working in 3D that you kind of rotate your camera there just to make sure that it looks good in different angles, just because you're working with multiple different axes. So you want to make sure that everything is lining up properly here. and it's looking good. So again, we're putting this all into a null, turning on symmetry, and then there we go. We have the eyeballs there. It's looking pretty cool so far. So we'll just hit save real quick and keep going. So okay, so next up, I'm going to copy and paste our shape that was down here. And then really, I'm just going to delete that and keep the cube here. And then just kind of flatten this out. And really with these shapes, I'm just trying to fill up a lot of space that is behind the eye here. And so I'm just trying to kind of recreate similar geometry that we see in our reference that is behind the eye. So there's a lot of different like sharp angles here. So we'll just kind of throw in a few cubes and just kind of play around with this. Again, bring in another cube and just adjust the size slightly here. And if you really look behind the eye, this portion is somewhat offset. So you have like this larger piece kind of taking up the majority of the back part of the eye, and then you have some other pieces at the top that's kind of hanging over that original geometry there. So cool. So I'll just copy and paste our shape here and rotate this and bring it over to this other side here. And inside here, it looks like it has a similar hook shape. And so we'll just kind of recreate that out of this shape. I will bring in a cube as well and kind of shrink that down and bring that over to our hook shape here. Next up, I'm going to bring in a taper, make that a child of our cube, and then just adjust the strength here. Now, if I rotate the taper and adjust that, I do get a different look when it comes to the shape there. But I'll actually go back, fit the parent, and then just kind of move that off center. And then just rotate this here. And then kind of adjust this, have it a little bit more centered. All right, so next up, I'll bring in another shear, fit the parent, and then just adjust the strength just to play around with this shape here. And I'll just make that a little bit thicker here. And then again, bring in our null, bring all of our items into that null and into a symmetry. And then we get that on the other side as well too. So cool. So looking pretty good. All right, so next up, we're going to bring in a cube and we're going to kind of bring it through the back here, adjust it to 10 each. And then with our cube here, I'm just trying to take up some space in the middle here, just to kind of bring in a little bit more geometry to the middle portion of the dragon here. And so again, I'll just kind of play around with those shapes there to kind of give it a cool look here. So I brought in a shear and bent that, and so you have more of a like a aggressive look with that angle there. That looks pretty good. I'll bring in a tube as well, and then again just adjust the radius, and then we'll just adjust the segments as well. And then with this tube here, again, I'm just trying to kind of fill up the head space a little bit more, so I'm trying to bring in a tube here. And then I'll just kind of reduce down the size. And so with this portion, I'm really not going too much with a reference here, just because you can't really see a lot of geometry. So I'm just trying to throw in some random geometry here in the head area, just to kind of take up a little bit of space here. And again, just kind of play around with it and see what we can kind of throw in here. So if you're following along here, you can kind of do whatever you like in the head portion over here, but really I'm just trying to throw in a few different pieces to, you know, make a different sort of look. But again, the main goal is just to take up a lot of space within the head area to make sure that it actually looks somewhat full and compact here. So all right, so next up, we need to kind of bring in more of like the face shape. So I'm going to bring in a cube here. And just elongate that a little bit. And then I'll just kind of adjust it to the snout area. And really with this seems to be more of like the kind of like the outline portion of the top half of the head. And then with this, I'll bring in a shear, I'll fit to parent and just adjust the strength there. And then I'll bring in a bend, fit to parent as well, and increase our segments and just kind of rotate this here. You can kind of see that it gives us a nice little curvature there. And so I'm just going to kind of play around with the bend shape here. And again, I'm trying to make a nice curvature around the head of this dragon here. So let me turn it this way. And of course, by adjusting our bends, it also adjusts to this cube here. So even bringing that out or bringing this in does affect it, even though it's technically not around our cube. I'm going to select our cube, bring that in, just adjust it to the bottom portion here. So it has a nice curvature here. What I'll do is bring in another cube here by just copy and pasting. And then I'll just kind of somewhat connect this to itself. I'll turn off our bend here and then really just adjust it so it's kind of flush to our original shape here. I'm going to select all that, just reduce down the size here and adjust it. Cool, so that gives us that nice curvature of the head portion, and I'll just again adjust it to the bottom portion. And then this part is somewhat clipping, so I'm just going to go in here and adjust some of these. Bring this up. Same thing with this pyramid. I'll just adjust it and bring it up. Cool. So I'm just kind of looking at these and kind of making sure that these seem somewhat good here. Now this one does need adjusting a bit, so I'll just kind of rotate this and bring this up and to the side here. And then again, I'm just kind of looking at these, making sure I'm getting the right shape. I'm gonna grab a null, throw our shapes into a null and bring in symmetry. And so we get the nice kind of curvature of the front portion of our head, or even just the top portion of our head here. And as I rotate it, it's looking pretty good. So, all right, so next up, I need to widen this jawline a little bit more. So I'm just going to copy and paste our shape here, just because I kind of need to elongate this out a little bit more. Then I'm just going to elongate that one out a bit. And same thing with this one. And then just kind of move those off a bit. And then I'm just trying to adjust it here slightly. Same with the bend as well. I'll just kind of adjust the strength there. And then what I'll do is bring in a null again, bring our shapes in, bring in a symmetry, and then we have that on the other side. So cool, so we have a good portion of the head done here. We did most of the top half of the dragon's head, and then we kind of established the jaw just now. And so I feel like now is a good stopping part for part one. Let's hop into the wrap-up section and finish this off. All right, so jumping into our wrap-up portion. For our first one today, mainly we just wanted to create initial steps into our dragon head here. Coming up next, we will continue to work on the top portion of the head a little bit more, and then really get into the bottom portion. And then in our third segment, I'm hoping we can kind of work on the body in our third segment here, and really start to kind of bring this dragon to life here. So let me know what you guys think. I had a lot of fun with this one. Again, with this, I just wanted to do something where it's a little bit more beginner friendly, but we are playing with a lot of shapes. Doing stuff like this kind of gets you a little bit more familiar with the software program if you are a little bit newer to Cinema 4D, or it's a good refresher if you've been playing around with Cinema 4D for a while and kind of playing around with different shapes. And by doing that, that kind of helps you in the future with all your other projects. You feel a little bit more confident with making different shapes because you've already done it before. So again, let me know what you guys think. If you want me to try out something else, feel free to throw it down in the comment section. But I'm excited for this next one. Part 2 is coming up. You guys have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one.